When the maid's son discovers an old box hidden inside a millionaire's office, he unintentionally uncovers letters that reveal a devastating secret. The powerful man who has ignored him for years is, in fact, his father. Between guilt, tears, and buried truths, both must choose between the pride that tore them apart and the love that could heal everything time has destroyed. Before we continue, subscribe now to the channel to receive powerful stories every day that truly touch the heart. The rain whispered against the tall windows of Waverley Manor, the kind of sound that filled the air with loneliness. Inside, Alexander Waverley, a 62-year-old billionaire with silver hair and a sharp, tired gaze, sat behind a mahogany desk buried under years of secrets. The house, vast and immaculate, carried an emptiness money could never silence. Portraits of his ancestors watched him from the walls, proud faces staring at a man who had built an empire yet lost something far greater along the way. Down the marble hallway, Eli, the 17-year-old son of the maid, moved quietly with a mop and a bucket, careful not to disturb the silence that ruled the mansion. He wore a plain white shirt, black pants, and the kind of humility that made him invisible. But behind those soft blue eyes, there was curiosity, the quiet kind that listens, learns, and waits. As thunder rolled outside, a gust of wind slipped through the cracked window, scattering old papers across the floor. Eli bent to gather them, and then froze. Beneath a loose plank near the bookshelf, something caught his attention. A small wooden box, sealed by time and dust, engraved with the initials AW. He hesitated, feeling the weight of a discovery that did not belong to him. Yet, somehow it called his name. Eli held the box carefully, as though it might break open the moment he breathed too close. Its hinges were rusted, its corners bruised by decades, but something about it felt alive, like it had been waiting for this very instant. He stood at the door of Alexander's office, hesitant, his reflection trembling on the polished wood. One soft knock echoed through the room. Alexander looked up from his papers, irritation flickering in his eyes. "What is it?" His voice carried the weight of command, the tone that silenced rooms and people alike. Eli stepped forward, holding out the box with both hands. "Sir, I found this under the floor, near your father's old desk." The name father seemed to cut through the air like a blade. The billionaire's gaze shifted to the object, and for the first time in years, the cold mask on his face cracked. He reached out slowly, tracing the initials with shaking fingers. His voice lowered to a whisper, almost to himself. "I thought this was gone." Eli couldn't tell if he had said it out of relief or fear. But whatever that box held, it was not just memory. It was something Alexander had buried long before the world knew his name. Alexander placed the box on his desk with trembling hands. The sound of the lock scraping open seemed louder than the storm outside. Eli watched, unsure if he should stay or leave, but something inside him whispered that he was meant to witness this moment. The lid creaked, releasing a faint scent of old paper and dust, the smell of forgotten years. Inside, neatly stacked beneath faded photographs, were letters tied with a red ribbon and a single sealed envelope bearing the same initials. M.H. Alexander's breath caught. He untied the ribbon with care, as if unwrapping a wound he never wanted to reopen. The letters were written in delicate handwriting, words of affection, regret, and a love that once defied the world. The name signed at the bottom made his pulse stop, Margaret Hale. Eli saw Alexander's expression darken. The proud man who once commanded boardrooms now looked like a ghost in his own house. His lips trembled as he whispered, "No one was supposed to find these." A letter slipped from his grasp and landed near Eli's feet. The boy bent to pick it up, but before he could, Alexander's voice broke the silence. Leave it." His tone was sharp, but his eyes revealed something else: fear. The storm outside had turned violent, lightning flashing across the glass as Alexander sank back into his chair, the letter trembling in his grip. Eli stood frozen near the door, uncertain whether to stay or run. The billionaire unfolded the fragile paper, his eyes moving across the lines with disbelief, each word cutting deeper than the last. "Alexander, if you're reading this, it means the world finally allowed you to remember me." The handwriting danced with sorrow. Margaret's words spoke of nights filled with silence, of a love that was condemned because of status, and of a promise that was broken before it could be kept. Eli watched the man's eyes fill with something he had never seen in them before: pain. Not the pain of power or loss, but of memory. At the bottom of the letter, a final line sent a shiver through him. "You never knew, but you have a son. He inherited your eyes." The paper slipped from Alexander's hands. His breath caught in his throat. He looked toward Eli, almost instinctively, and for the first time truly saw him. The boy's bright blue eyes reflected the flicker of the storm, the same color as his own. The silence between them grew heavy, almost unbearable. Alexander's gaze stayed fixed on Eli, as if searching for an explanation written somewhere across the boy's face. Those eyes, so vivid, so familiar, were impossible to ignore. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping the marble floor. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low but trembling. Eli stepped back, startled. "Sir, I'm just the maid's son." The words came out quietly, as if he were apologizing for existing. Alexander turned away, running a hand through his silver hair, trying to steady his breath. Memories came rushing back, the laughter of Margaret, her defiance, her promise that love didn't need permission. But time had stolen all of that, and now, her ghost seemed to stare at him through this boy's innocent eyes. Eli reached down, picking up another letter that had fallen from the box. "She wrote more," he said softly. Alexander hesitated before taking it, his hands still trembling. "No," he whispered. "No more ghosts tonight." But the way he looked at Eli, the fear, the denial, the hope he tried to bury, told another truth entirely. Something deep inside him already knew. The following morning, the mansion felt different, tense, almost watchful. The box still sat open on Alexander's desk, its contents spilling traces of a life he never lived. Eli had barely slept, replaying the billionaire's reaction over and over in his mind. Something inside him whispered that the truth wasn't done speaking yet. When Alexander called for Grace, Eli's mother, the air in the room turned thick. Grace, a woman in her late 40s, with gentle eyes and tired hands, stepped in wearing her blue maid's uniform, unaware of the storm waiting behind the door. "You wanted to see me, sir?" she asked, her voice polite but wary. Alexander didn't answer at first. He simply held up one of Margaret's letters. "You worked for my father's estate, didn't you? Tell me the truth, Grace. Where did this come from?" Grace's eyes flicked toward the box, then to her son, and something inside her broke. Her lips trembled. "Please, don't make me do this," she whispered. But Alexander's stare pressed harder. Finally, her shoulders slumped. "She was my friend," Grace said, her voice cracking. "Margaret Hale. She gave me that box before she died, and asked me to protect her son." Her eyes filled with tears. To protect him. Alexander's world tilted. For a moment, all he could hear was the sound of the clock ticking behind him. Steady, cruel, relentless. "Protect him," he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. Grace nodded, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Margaret was dying, sir. She didn't want the boy to be taken away, to be judged for who his mother was. She made me promise to raise him quietly, to keep his last name hidden." Eli's body went still. His gaze darted between them, confusion clouding his eyes. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice trembling. Grace covered her face with her hands. "I'm so sorry, Eli. I was only trying to give you a life she never could." The boy took a step back, the truth crashing down faster than he could process. Everything he thought he knew, who he was, where he belonged, had just been rewritten. Alexander turned toward the window, his reflection fragmented in the rain-streaked glass. The man who had built empires suddenly looked small. "So all this time," he murmured, "he was under my roof, and I never knew." His voice broke on the final word. Grace tried to speak, but he raised a hand, stopping her. "Get out," he said softly, a whisper filled with more pain than anger. The room fell silent, and the boy who had always been invisible was now seen for the very first time. The storm outside mirrored the one inside. Alexander's composure shattered as he turned, his face pale with disbelief. "You lied to me." His voice thundered through the room, echoing down the marble halls. Grace flinched, but she didn't defend herself. Her tears spoke louder than words. "You stole my right to know him," he continued, his tone trembling between fury and heartbreak. Eli stepped forward, his hands shaking. "Sir, please stop yelling at her. She was just trying to protect me." The words only fueled Alexander's anger. "Protect you? From what, me?" His chest heaved, his fists clenched at his sides. "I could have given you everything. Education, security, a name." But even as he spoke, something deeper twisted in his voice: regret. Grace sobbed, unable to meet his gaze. "You don't understand," she said. "Margaret didn't want him raised in this world of pride and lies." Alexander froze, her words slicing through his rage. For a heartbeat, silence filled the room again, the kind that hurts more than shouting. His voice dropped, low and shaking. "Get out of my sight," he whispered. Grace hesitated, then obeyed. As the door closed, Alexander's hand hit the desk, and for the first time, the mighty man felt the weight of a life built on half-truths, and a son he never knew he'd lost. Eli's world was spinning. The storm outside had turned the gardens into rivers of mud, but he barely felt the rain soaking through his white shirt as he ran. Behind him, the mansion glowed like a distant ghost, each flash of lightning slicing its windows into mirrors of regret. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get away. From the shouting, from the truth, from the man who had called him boy his whole life and was now something far worse. His father. Inside the manor, Alexander stood in the empty hallway, his anger gone, replaced by something heavier: silence. The echo of Eli's footsteps still lingered, fading down the stone path. He turned toward the desk where the letters lay scattered, their edges curling in the damp air. One photo caught his eye: Margaret, smiling, holding a baby wrapped in a blanket. The resemblance was undeniable. His breath hitched. "What have I done?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm. Meanwhile, Eli reached the edge of the property, collapsing near an old bus stop that overlooked the city lights. He pressed the letter he had taken from the box to his chest, its paper wet and torn. Lightning flashed again, and he whispered into the rain, "Why didn't you tell me, Mom?" His voice broke. For the first time in his life, Eli felt utterly alone, not as a servant, but as a son without a name. The mansion, once alive with the hum of power, now felt like a mausoleum. Alexander sat alone in his office, the storm having quieted into a steady drizzle. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock, each second a reminder of time wasted. Before him, the open box stared back like a mirror, filled with the ghosts of a love he had buried. He picked up one of the letters, tracing the faded ink with his thumb. Margaret's words spoke of hope, forgiveness, and a son she wished he could meet. The regret hit him like a wave. He rose slowly and walked toward the large mirror behind his desk. The man staring back looked older than his years. Eyes hollow, shoulders heavy. "I built everything," he murmured, "but I never built a life." His reflection blurred as his eyes filled with tears. For the first time in decades, Alexander Waverly, the man who ruled through fear and pride, fell to his knees before the truth he could no longer deny. Across town, Eli sat under the dim glow of a streetlight, soaked and shivering. He unfolded the crumpled letter again. In it, Margaret had written, "If he ever finds you, don't hate him, Eli. He's not the man he pretends to be." The boy wiped his eyes, torn between anger and longing. He didn't know if he could ever forgive Alexander, but somewhere deep inside, he wished the man would try. By dawn, the sky hung heavy with fog, wrapping Waverly Manor in shades of gray. Alexander hadn't slept. His office was still littered with letters and regrets, but something inside him had shifted. He stood by the window, holding one of Margaret's photos, her smile frozen in time. For years, he had controlled every aspect of his empire, every deal, every word, except the truth. And now, the truth had left his house in the middle of the night, wearing soaked shoes and carrying a broken heart. He grabbed his coat and car keys. "Find Eli," he told his driver. The man hesitated. Alexander had never spoken the boy's name before. "Sir, it's still raining," he replied carefully. "Then get wet," Alexander said. His tone was calm, but behind it was a desperation that no wealth could mask. As the car rolled through the city streets, his thoughts echoed louder than the engine. How many times had I walked past him? How many times had he called me sir, while I looked right through him? Meanwhile, Eli wandered through the quiet outskirts of town, clutching the damp letter in his hand. The world around him blurred, the lights, the voices, the memories. He wanted to disappear, but the words of his mother haunted him like a whisper in the wind. "Don't hate him, Eli." The sentence replayed again and again, breaking through his anger. And though he didn't know it, miles behind him, a car was already searching, not for a servant, not for a mistake, but for a son. The rain returned before sunrise, soft at first, then relentless. Eli sat on a bench beneath the flickering light of an old bus stop, his clothes soaked, his eyes hollow. The letter lay in his lap, folded neatly now, as if protecting it could somehow protect what was left of his heart. Each passing car splashed through puddles, but he didn't look up until one set of headlights slowed. Alexander stepped out of the black car, rain immediately clinging to his coat and silver hair. For a moment, he didn't move. He just stood there, watching the boy who had unknowingly carried his name all his life. "Eli," he said softly, almost afraid of the sound of it. The boy turned, startled. Their eyes met, and that single look said everything neither had been brave enough to speak. "I read the letters," Alexander began, his voice shaking. "All of them. And I saw the truth I ran from for half my life." Eli's throat tightened. "Why now?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why did it take this long to see me?" Alexander swallowed hard. "Because I was blind," he whispered. "But not anymore." He stepped closer, rain dripping down his face like tears. For a moment, the storm around them seemed to fade, replaced by something quieter, rawer. Two souls, finally seeing each other in the rain. They stood beneath the downpour, drenched and trembling, neither sure what to say next. The years of silence between them felt heavier than the storm itself. Alexander took a deep breath, his voice low but firm. "I can't change the past," he said. "But if I could trade everything I own just to have one moment with you as my son, I would." His words cut through the rain, raw and unguarded, the confession of a man who had finally run out of excuses. Eli looked away, his jaw tight. You can't just show up and fix this, he murmured. You don't know what it's like to grow up invisible. His voice cracked at the last word. Alexander stepped closer, his expression breaking. You're right, he admitted. I don't. But I know what it's like to live surrounded by everything and still feel empty. You think I didn't lose anything? I lost you before I ever knew I had you. The boy's lips trembled. The anger that had once burned so fiercely began to crumble under the weight of understanding. The rain fell harder, blurring the world around them until there was nothing left but truth. Eli's voice softened. You can't just erase what happened. Alexander nodded slowly. I don't want to erase it, he said. I just want to start again. And though neither moved, something invisible between them began to heal, a bridge forming in the middle of the storm. The rain eased into a drizzle, but the tension between them only deepened. Eli took a step back, his breath uneven. You think saying sorry changes everything? He asked, his voice trembling between pain and defiance. You built a world where people like us don't even exist. You looked at me every day and never saw me. Each word hit Alexander harder than any storm. He lowered his head, his pride unraveling. You're right, Alexander whispered. I was too proud to look down and too blind to look up. I built walls instead of bridges. But I'm done pretending those walls kept me safe. They only kept me alone. His words carried the weariness of a man finally stripped of everything but truth. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph, Margaret holding baby Eli. She wanted you to know who you were, he said softly, and I wanted to forget who I was. Eli stared at the photo, his throat closing. The man before him wasn't the same one who once barked orders across marble floors. This was someone broken, human, trembling beneath his own guilt. I don't know if I can forgive you, Eli said, voice shaking. Alexander's reply came almost as a plea. Then don't forgive me yet. Just let me try to be the man she hoped I could be. The boy's eyes glistened. For the first time, he didn't walk away. The city was quiet now. The rain had softened into mist, and dawn crept slowly over the horizon. Eli stood beneath the fading streetlight, still clutching the photograph. His fingers trembled, not from the cold, but from everything he couldn't say. Alexander approached carefully, each step carrying decades of regret. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was fragile, sacred. Alexander's voice broke through the quiet. I don't expect you to call me father, he said. But if there's even the smallest chance to earn that word someday, I'll spend the rest of my life trying. His eyes, once sharp with authority, now shimmered with something different, humility. He extended his hand, uncertain, afraid it might be refused. Eli stared at it, his heart pounding. Then, slowly, he stepped forward, not to shake the hand, but to fall into his arms. The embrace was wordless yet louder than any apology. Alexander held him tightly, his body trembling as years of pride dissolved into tears. You were never invisible, he whispered. I just refused to see. Eli clung to him, his tears mixing with the rain. In that moment, all the pain, all the silence, all the distance, it broke. And what remained was the simplest truth of all. A father and son finally finding each other in the wreckage of their past. Months later, sunlight filled the once silent halls of Waverly Manor. The portraits that had washed over generations of pride now overlooked something entirely new: life. Children's laughter echoed from the grand foyer, their small footsteps replacing the cold stillness of the past. Alexander had turned part of the estate into a home for orphan youth, a place of second chances he named the Margaret House. Every wall carried a story, and every story carried forgiveness. Eli walked beside him through the garden where everything had once fallen apart. He was different now, confident, studying, no longer the invisible boy in a maid's shadow. Alexander, though older and slower, carried himself with peace in his eyes. "You did this," Eli said quietly. The man smiled. "No," he replied. "We did." They stopped beside a small plaque beneath the roses. It read, "For those who were unseen, until love opened their eyes." As the camera pulls back, the house glows under the morning sun. The wind carries the sound of laughter, not just from the children, but from hearts finally free. A gentle narration closes the story. Sometimes, the truth doesn't destroy us. It rebuilds us. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel now, leave your like, and share this video so that more people can discover that even the smallest act of courage can change the world. Write in the comments, "I believe in the power of courage." Together, let's spread stories that transform lives and prove that hope can rise from the most unexpected voices. Thank you so much for your support.